So I'm going to talk about cloud computing. The agenda for this next 25 minutes or so is I will describe for non-technical people what is the cloud. This is not a technical presentation, although I'm a bit of a techie myself. What is the cloud? What is the cloud not? What is not the cloud? What can you do in the cloud with cloud systems these days? What you shouldn't do or shouldn't consider or think about with cloud systems. And then should you guys and your businesses be looking at using cloud systems for various things in your places of work. So we'll hopefully get through all of that in about 25 minutes and have hopefully a few minutes at the end for questions. So what is the cloud? Who's heard the term? We've all heard the term the cloud. Have you heard other terms? Have you heard SaaS? Who's heard of SaaS? Software as a service. Then the SaaS is a good one. There's oops, sorry, wrong button. SaaS is software as a service, which is just another fancy way of saying cloud services. There's also infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, desktop as a service, back-end as a service. There's a whole bunch of different terms. Web computing, online services, browser-based systems. By and large, they're all basically the same thing for us normal humans that don't have to worry about the technical details. So when you see all these terms, I'm calling it the cloud, okay? And technically inclined people would beg to differ with me, but for our purposes, the cloud is all these things and more, but you don't need to worry too much about the specific terminology. I'm going to describe the cloud in very general, hopefully understandable terms, and we'll go on from there. So the Oxford Dictionary defines cloud as a noun, meaning a visible mass of condensed watery vapor floating in the atmosphere. Actually, the Oxford Dictionary has about 6 definitions for cloud. I chose 2 here. So that's cloud. Most of us, when we hear the word cloud, we think of a cloud, white and fluffy. What does that have to do with computer systems? Actually, I think the definition that actually is maybe a little bit more relevant for cloud computing is something that obscures. Now, it's not something that obscures in a bad way. It's something that obscures and hides from us unnecessary details. Okay? And I'll explain that a little bit further as we go through the rest of the presentation. So in English, I Googled the cloud, and I thought about it, and I've done the cloud for years, and I thought, where have I ever seen a definition of what the cloud is that would be useful to normal people as opposed to computer geeks? And I couldn't come up with one. I couldn't find one. They were all long-winded and complex and required acronyms and some knowledge of the industry. So I've tried to put it in English. For us, the cloud is using a computer system that's somewhere else. And that's it in a nutshell. Using a computer system that's somewhere else. So you're not installing a system in your office or in your place of work. It's somewhere else, and that's fine. I'll explain what that means a little bit more as we go along here. So common aspects. These days, most cloud systems are accessed via the internet. And that's actually where the term the cloud came from. The internet is often referred to as the cloud because it's this amorphous thing out there, and no single person in the world knows all the connections on the internet. There's simply too many of them. So they start calling it the cloud because we connect to the internet, we go to Starbucks, and we connect with our iPads or our phones or our computers, and it somehow connects us to the website or whatever it is we're looking for. We don't know how, but we don't really care. It's like a phone. The phone system, it connects to the phone network somehow, and there are people who know how, but most of us don't really care as long as it works. Right? So that's a common aspect of today's cloud systems is they're out there in the internet. All you have to do is be able to connect to the internet to access your cloud system. Usually, not always, but usually what we refer to as cloud systems are things that are out there in the internet somewhere, and we get to them using a browser. So Internet Explorer or Firefox or Safari or Chrome, Google Chrome. One of those browsers, we get to the system via a browser. So it's like going to a website. Okay? Other common aspects of cloud systems these days is, well, actually cloud systems ever, is you don't really know where it physically is. Okay? And you don't really care. Right? As long as it's out there and it's reliable, you don't need to know where the servers that you're accessing and doing stuff with, you don't need to know where they are, but that's okay because, again, we don't know where the machines that connect the phone systems are, but we don't care as long as it works. Right? The other thing about cloud systems that people don't necessarily think about first is They're usually extremely large scale and highly redundant. And that's one of the reasons why we put systems in the cloud, is because there are big advantages of saying, well, rather than you having a system, and you having a system, and you having a system, and all of you have to make them work, and you have to get help to make them work usually, let's put all of your systems in one place and get the experts to work on them all together and have these economies of scale. And we've heard about economies of scale in manufacturing. We've heard about economies of scale in economies in general. With the cloud out there, there are even greater benefits to economies of scale, and I will get into that in a little bit more detail later on. But that very large scale and highly redundant means that individually we're not paying a lot, but we're getting the benefits of the huge scale that the cloud companies, so Amazon and Microsoft and Google, they can invest the sums of money and the time required to get that very large scale, and then they can share it out with thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of people, and the cost comes down from there. Okay. So cloud and not cloud. Some people are more visual. So I've described what I think is in English a workable definition of the cloud. This is diagrammatic for those who are more visual. This is very, very simple on-premise or traditional system, a non-cloud system. You've got laptops and PCs and terminals and physical hardware, and they're wired to something called a switch or a router, and that's wired to the server, and the whole lot is in your office. Fairly straightforward. We've probably all got some sort of network or computers that are wired together in our office. Even small home-based businesses these days tend to have at least a couple of computers that are wired together. So how does that differ when you talk about being in the cloud? And it's really very simple. You've taken the server and you've put it somewhere else. And the cloud is the bit in between that obscures from you where the server physically is. You're still doing things with your laptops and your PCs and your terminals. In the office, they're probably still wired together so you can share files around together and things like that. There's a router that connects it to the internet, and then the internet takes care of the rest, just like the phone system. We don't know how the phone system connects when we dial those 10 digits, but it does. So the server is somewhere else. Other than that, it's basically the same as a non-cloud system. But what the cloud does for us, apart from that large scale and redundancy that we talked about earlier, what the cloud also does for us is it says, well, that server, and I've moved the server into the cloud, is accessible at the office, but it's also accessible from our phones and our tablets and our laptops at Starbucks or at home or anywhere in the world that I want to access that system. So I've instantly, by putting the system in the cloud, I've instantly given myself access. If I want to grant, or whoever I want to grant access to the system, if I give them the logins and they can prove that they're the right person, they can access that system from anywhere in the world without wiring each office in. So if I open a new office in Chicago, I'm already connected. They just have to have an internet connection and away they go. They can connect to the system just as easily as they could from home or from the existing office in Vancouver. So now I'm going to go to common myths. And there's a lot of fear around the cloud and cloud systems, especially amongst business people, because we don't understand how it works. But there probably was a lot of fear and trepidation about phone systems when they first came in, and faxes and things like that. I don't know if this could be useful. How does it work? Is it safe? Is it secure? Well, the same issues have come up around the cloud, but there's 4 myths that I'm going to hopefully dispel as we go through here. Myth number 1, the cloud is not safe. That couldn't be further from the truth. One of the things that I think people are slowly coming to realize is that when you have a system that's in the cloud, it's safer than you could possibly make a system in your own office. Even very large companies simply can't afford to spend the kind of money that's required to get the physical security, the firewalls, the antivirus, the backups and fail-safes and power redundancy and so on, and the monitoring that's required to make that system as safe as you can when you're in the cloud. And again, it's the economy of scale. So Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all these people, they have these huge economies of scale, so they put the very best firewalls in place. Very, very, very difficult to break into a hosted system. In your office, You might have a good firewall, you might have the standard protections. It will not be as good as a cloud system. Physical security. How many people here have had their office broken into in, say, the last 10 years? Oh, come on, somebody must have. Okay, so you're the special crowd that has never had any break-ins in the last 10 years. It happens, right? Physical security is a problem. We've had many clients over the years that have had break-ins, and people steal computers because they can flog them for something. Now, usually, it's relatively harmless. It's a nuisance because they steal the computers and they flog them out the back of a truck. But if somebody was to find somebody that you didn't want to, was to find those servers or buy them and access the information on them, that would be a worry. You need to have a retina scan to get into the building of most major data centers. So you have to have an invitation, you have to prove who you are, and they will scan your retina to make sure that you're the right person that's authorized to get into that building. And I've never had an invitation, so I've never had my retina scanned. So myth number one, the cloud is very, very safe. Okay? It is very reliable, it's very secure, it is very consistent, so it's up all the time. Stuff never gets stolen from cloud data centers. Myth number two, I could lose my data or I could lose control of my data. Now there is a grain of truth in this one. However, it really is an overblown fear. Cloud systems have, again, the economy of scale, and they're constantly backing up all the information on their servers. And that is a technology which is widely used. Only large companies, generally speaking, can afford to do it in-house. But again, the economies of scale for cloud systems, they're constantly replicating all the information that they're hosting for you, and for thousands of others, to other servers that are physically separate. So for instance, Microsoft has 4 data centers in the US for hosting CRM and Office 365 and other things. And they are constantly replicating. Everything that's on each one of those data centers is being replicated to one of the other 3 data centers in North America, 7 by 24, all the time. So in theory, if somebody nuked Seattle, hope not, but if they did, you'd be disconnected, give it a couple of minutes, reconnect, and you'd have lost a few minutes worth of work, but your data would be live and up and running on a different data center. It might be in Chicago, might be in Atlanta, might be in Houston. We don't know, and again, we don't care, because it's out there, it's replicated, it's super reliable. So they don't do traditional backups. You don't have to change the tape every night or put a new disk in to burn your backups. They're constantly replicating things all the time. So there is redundancy in the systems. They also have redundant other systems: power, cooling, internet connectivity. One of the big advantages that people in companies that have multiple offices, it encourages them to go to cloud, is that if I have 5 offices, I have a head office and I have 4 branch offices, and I have all my systems at head office, well, I've got maybe an internet connection for each office, including head office. What happens if there's a power failure at head office? Now all 5 locations are down. If I'm in the cloud and I have a power failure at head office, well, head office is down, but the 4 branches can keep going because the system is in the cloud. The data centers that hold these things, if their power goes down, they have power generators. They keep going. They have redundant internet connections. Somebody digs up an internet line and knocks out half of Seattle. Well, they have a redundant connection. They're going to be connected to the other half of Seattle, and they'll carry on. So that redundancy, again, is on a scale that we can't possibly replicate ourselves in each of our individual businesses. There is that grain of truth, though. One of the things you must be careful of, if you are looking at a cloud system, is make sure that you read the contract and find out how you get your data when you might decide to move to a different provider. Okay? So one of the things that occasionally is a problem with cloud services is the providers don't give you the ability to pull the data off and take it to somewhere else. They try and lock you in. Okay? Not many companies do it, but there are some out there. So check that one. If you're looking to move part of your business onto the cloud, just make sure that they have a policy where if you ask for your data, they'll give it to you in a nice, convenient format so that you can go to a different cloud system or pull that data and go in-house again. That happens too. There are other reasons why you might do that. But if you do need to get your data, all of it, in a useful fashion, rather than running a bunch of reports to get it, make sure that's in the contract.